Developed by Machine Games, Wolfenstein 2 is a true generational leap in visual design over the Wolfenstein reboot in 2014. It looks incredible. The physically based materials, the dynamic lights and shadowing, and even GPU accelerated particles, it all amounts to a clear upgrade over what we had before. Much of this is down to the shift in engine. This has been vastly overhauled since the original Wolfenstein, which relied on a customized id Tech 5. Wolfenstein 2, by comparison, borrows the id Tech 6 technologies introduced in the recent Doom reboot. It means we get a shift from the pre-baked lighting and shadows of the original to a beautiful, fully dynamic lighting model. On top of that is the use of a similar but impressive post-effects pipeline. Visual tricks like bokeh depth of field, object and camera motion blur, HDR bloom, film grain and temporal anti-aliasing each make a return from Doom. All of these combine to once again effectively create an almost filmic quality to each frame. Wolfenstein 2 makes full use of the upgraded id Tech 6 engine then, but even so it takes it in its own unique visual direction. There's a beautiful use of depth of field in particular, and those GPU accelerated particles work well to lend the game's futuristic weaponry a sense of heft. From the automatic machine guns to this laser cannon, each spews out a burst of particle effects with properties for radiosity, delivering a great sense of impact on the world. Tying into Wolfenstein's dystopic setting, the volumetric lighting streaking across each metallic corridor worked well for building atmosphere this time, something the Doom reboot in 2016 pushed quite heavily. All combined, it creates a bright but dense and claustrophobic air to each of Wolfenstein 2's levels. All of this is made especially impressive by the fact it's targeting 60 frames per second on console. Now sadly, this isn't achieved perfectly on PS4 or Xbox One by any means, and I'll cover the performance point in a moment. But first, let's talk image quality. What you're seeing here is Wolfenstein 2 running on PS4 Pro with its 4K output selected. To cut to the chase, that in truth gets you a native 2560 by 1440 image from the machine. So that's 1440p on PS4 Pro, a reasonable result, while a standard PS4 by comparison runs at a native 1920 by 1080. And if we look at the original Xbox One, you get an even lower metric of around 1440 by 810. That's 75% of the pixels on each axis compared to a full 1080p. The result is you do get a visibly softer image on Xbox One at that 810p figure. It begs the question of what the X model can do to help, but for now it's definitely the worst looking version of the three. Now given the original Wolfenstein ran with a dynamic resolution on PS4 and Xbox One, I curiously haven't spotted any radical drops in pixel count around these numbers so far. Though it's possible, the game's stress points just don't reveal much variance in resolution, though it's worth pointing out PC still has an option for dynamic res. It makes sense it'd appear on console, but for now the consistent result is 1440p on Pro, 1080p on PS4 and 810p on Xbox One.
Got myself a new exit.
But what about PS4 Pro's enhancements? Besides that upgrade in resolution, Pro users also enjoy improved texture filtering across the floor. But besides that, improvements are sadly on the meager side here. The resolution and texture filtering advantages only apply during gameplay too. Major cutscenes aren't usually rendered in-engine. Instead, developer Machine Games relies on pre-rendered movie files to tell the major beats of the story. These are high quality videos rendered offline, the same assets as used on PS4 and Xbox One, running at 1080p and 30 frames per second. That's what you get on PS4 Pro 2, accounting for the large 50GB install size of the game. It's a fairly straightforward PS4 Pro implementation then, a boost to 1440p with some texture filtering upgrades. Shadow and ambient occlusion quality appear to stay the same meanwhile, as does base texture quality. The real dividing point though, you'd hope, would be in performance. So here we go, a direct comparison between base PS4 on left and PS4 Pro on right. The early wheelchair bound sections of the game run at a smooth 60fps as you'd hope from a game built on id Tech, with only a few one-off drop frames. It's nothing major to worry about. For the first 30 minutes, the game runs faultlessly at this number on PlayStation consoles, but unlike Doom before it, this isn't a sustainable target. Once we get to our feet, the fact is just looking at a complex area brings both consoles down to the mid 50 FPS point. With lots of enemies on screen and those GPU accelerated particles in play, the line starts to dip, even on PS4 Pro. It's difficult to call any clear winner between the two. The metrics are broadly in that 50 to 60 FPS ballpark on both though, and typically on the higher end of that. The motion blur does help to hide those drops, however it is a shame the slick performance profile of Doom isn't translating across, a game which we celebrated for running smoothly at 60 FPS on console. In the case of Wolfenstein 2, that priority has shifted. Which makes you wonder, how does the same shootout operate on Xbox One? Given the resolution drop to around 810p on that machine, you'd hope frame rates would balance out at a similar level of performance to PS4. The fact is, performance is worse on Xbox One compared to the other console versions, and by a noticeable degree. The game wavers from 50 to 60 FPS more aggressively, and the machine does touch the lower bounds of that more often than either PlayStation console. Again, it's surprising that this isn't triggered by any action. After the shootout is done, we're left to walk the same room with similar drops to the 50 FPS line. All of which points to the fact this isn't an exceptional issue. This is the baseline performance of simply rendering this scene, encompassing the lighting and shadow quality across the room. Unlike Doom, there's a sense this just isn't optimized entirely with console limits in mind. Before Xbox One X lands, the best way to play on console for now is on PS4 or PS4 Pro, and besides the shift upwards to 1440p on Pro, there's really not much to divide the two in any other aspect. They both look gorgeous, and while performance isn't perfectly ironed out at 60 FPS, it's still enough to give a decent experience most of the way. The version to look out for is of course Xbox One X, which I'll be covering in due course, but let's not overlook the announced Switch version as well. Given the limits of Nintendo's hardware compared to these more powerful dedicated consoles, it'll be fascinating to see how such a tech showcase can run in portable mode. But that's all I have for now. If you did find this useful and want to see our upcoming Xbox One X coverage of Wolfenstein 2, do feel free to like and subscribe. And as ever, this video is presented at 4K and is seen best at source file quality at our Patreon, digitalfoundry.net. But until next time, thanks for watching.
That's it. Controller bay.